Before we got into it, though, I was wondering. So we are all on energy Twitter, and it's been a dramatic moment on Twitter in which it's sometimes, and in some ways, feels like um, maybe it's falling apart. And I was
Wait, what's
wondering
been going
where.
on with Twitter?
No comment other than if it does fall apart, has anybody given thought about what platform you would go to? Are we Discording? Are we, what is like Mastodon or something? There's Reddit. Has anybody thought this through?
I'm just gonna go back to like WordPress, and people can leave comments if they want. I mean, I'm kind of like Twitter ride or die at this point, and candidly, despite all the negative feedback, I personally think Twitter has only become more entertaining in the last several weeks.
I,
What with the Chiquita account and Eli Lilly, that's some good fun online.
it is. My kids have been illuminating me on that, and I really appreciate it. I just keep my head on the boring worky stuff. But yep.
Dan, are you going anywhere? Or are you just not worried about it? You're riding.
I'm
You
just
got the blue
waiting
check mark.
every day.
You've got
Yeah, I'm
the
like, do I
official blue
still
check
have
mark.
that? I don't know. I'm not paying for it. I know that for sure.
Well,
Nice.
So Elon Musk right now, he's like, oh, Dan's not paying for it. We got to scrap that plan.
yeah.
There you go.
I have to say, it is remarkable how fast somebody can just burn a $44 billion investment. Like, there's no capital, there's no like physical stuff to sell. He can't like sell machinery. It's not like a plant that you can take apart and auction off parts of it. It's just the brand and like a bunch of servers. He fired
Yeah.
most of the staff, and advertisers are fleeing. And just like, I cannot imagine having that much money that you're just like, yeah, I'm just gonna burn through this huge amount of debt, these tens of billions of dollars I just took on.
And don't forget, insult the advertisers on their way out, so they
Yeah.
don't even
Yeah.
come back.
I mean, nobody 3 weeks ago was talking about Twitter possibly just
No.
becoming like just insolvent and financially dead.
No, nobody was talking about it. I'm thinking of trying to follow somebody to Mastodon. I think that's where I would like to follow someone, but I can't do this on my own. I need somebody to tell me how to do this.
Mastodon is too confusing. I'll wait to get tapped on the shoulder by the right person, I guess.
Yeah, too confusing for what? The masters from Cambridge, Oxford, somewhere over there is still too confusing for you.
Yeah, Travis, I think, has the record for least Harvard drops of any Harvard grad I know.
You're too kind.
We've started in hard times to bring us all into the laughter through thick and through thin, for public power enthusiasts without and within. Roll on, enthusiasts, roll on. Roll on, enthusiasts, roll on.
Thanks for pressing play on Public Power Underground. I'm Paul Dockery.
I'm Dan Catchpole.
I'm Abigail Sawyer.
Joining as this week's celebrity guest star is Travis Kavulla. Travis is the Vice President of Regulatory Affairs at NRG and former regulatory, serving as a commissioner on the Montana Public Service Commission. Welcome to Public Power Underground, Travis.
Thank you. Glad to be with all of you today.
And you are joining us from
the Marriott Hotel, hosting the NARUC annual meeting here in New Orleans, Louisiana.
That is outstanding.
It's the most drab place you could be in New Orleans, but I'll rectify that later in the evening.
I believe you will. I think you're going to be like our special correspondent from NARUC this year. Very exciting.
Happy to serve.
On today's episode of Public Power Underground, we're approaching some electric utility and electric utility adjacent news from a regulatory angle. We'll talk elections, NARUC, bifurcated price formation, and legislative mandates for RTO participation. Then we're short-circuiting our way through the rest of the topics we didn't get to in this week in a segment we're calling Short to Ground. But before we get started, a quick word from our presenting sponsor. Public Power Underground is brought to you by the Energy Authority. The Energy Authority is a nonprofit company that specializes in portfolio management and prides itself on leading communities through today's energy transformation. Owned by public power entities, TEA is more than just adjacent. They're as underground as it gets. TEA is on a mission to help clients maximize the value of their assets while meeting their power supply goals. Great mission. By providing expertise in energy trading, advanced analytics, advisory, and renewable solutions, TEA equips public power utilities with access to state-of-the-art resources and technology systems so they can respond competitively in the changing energy markets. With over 60 other public power utilities proudly partnering with TEA to tackle their energy future, it's time for you to consider breaking ground too. Let TEA help you navigate the uncertain future of our industry by visiting teainc.org. That's teainc.org to learn more today. Next up is Public Power Desktop, where we close out some browser tabs of energy and energy adjacent news. You got the first story, Dan. Take it away.
All right. Well, Tuesday, November 8th was election day. News Data's publications have the Western energy angles covered for you. I covered the elections for the Montana Public Service Commission and PUD races in the Northwest for clearing up. And Ernst covered California elections for California energy markets, including the defeat of Proposition 30, a measure that would have taxed the wealthy to fund zero-emission vehicles and wildfire mitigation programs. And our own Abigail Sawyer covered the rest of the West in California energy markets, including Colorado and New Mexico, handing decisive re-election victories to their Democratic governors and maintaining Democratic control in the legislative chambers of both those states. The results in Arizona and Nevada were still unclear at the time of publication for our November 11th newsletters. I thought it was a fascinating election, some really surprising results, as everybody else did. I was particularly interested in, Travis and I were talking about this a little bit on Friday. I'll put you on the spot, Travis. So what do you think of Montana Public Service Commission's newest elected member, Ann Bukacek?
Yeah, so Annie Bukacek ran from the Flathead Valley, which is a very conservative district. It's balanced out by Lewis and Clark County, where Helena, Montana is based. And as you would expect, the state capital leans more to the left. So it's a district with a significant Republican advantage, and that Republican advantage manifested pretty clearly in the election. So the commission in Montana will continue to have 5 members, all of whom are Republican. And there was pretty active debate, I'd say, and they raised a good amount of money, each of them, with Dr. Bukacek sort of generically advocating for lower rates, while her opponent sort of claimed the mantle of greater experience in the industry. But that candidly does not seem to have mattered in the face of having an R or D attached to your name. So it's an interesting thing to elect commissions. I know we're going to talk about a couple of others that are elected, but as a reminder to your listeners, there are about a dozen regulatory commissions that are elected in the United States, all of them on a partisan basis. And you know, the good of that is that you get to be your own base of power. You're not subject necessarily to the influence of the governor or other elected officials, which is the case in other jurisdictions where the commission's independence might be questioned. And of course, the bad is that you tend to draw not necessarily the candidates with the greatest amount of experience, but whoever can win an election. You know, these elections used to matter a lot when they were regulating railroads, and when the railroad was perhaps the livelihood of rural agricultural communities. Who you elected as commissioner might actually be more important than who you elected as attorney general or even the governor. But now, despite the importance that voters place on energy issues, it's hard to see public service commission races really breaking through on the issues, unless there's something that's really particularly on fire in a state like rooftop solar net metering.
Imagine, for instance.
For example.
For example. We'll talk a little bit about that coming up. But before we go, can somebody orient me for the West? Like Washington, Oregon, and California are all appointed by the governor and their commission. Is that right? And
likewise,
then
Nevada.
Likewise, Nevada. Others in the
Arizona.
West that are elected?
So Republicans held on to their 2 seats that were up in the Arizona Corporation Commission election.
Not certain yet.
Right. Oh, not certain. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, they're still counting votes, but
okay.
Take it away, Abigail, on the Southwest.
Well, yeah, let's go with that. I mean, actually, you say Republicans held on to their 2 seats, but if the Republicans, who are currently leading by, about a point, I think, prevail, then they will have ousted Democrat Sandra Kennedy, who from her first term this go round, she was running for re-election, but she served on the commission before. And if you want to know the deep and dirty saga behind all of that, you can become a subscriber of California Energy Markets and look to our archives, because there's just all sorts of intrigue. If you're the type, if you are a true electric enthusiast who likes to dive into utility regulatory soap opera drama, I believe you me, the Arizona Corporation Commission has it for you.
Yeah, the nexus of electric utility enthusiasts and also political wonks. I mean, that's the Venn diagram. It maybe just be Travis, or is that your Venn diagram, Travis?
Surely there's more than me who love following election news and regulating utilities.
Well, I often joke that I'm gonna quit and write the miniseries for Netflix about the Arizona Corporation Commission. But
yeah, close rival in the New Mexico Public Regulatory Commission.
Yeah, well, that'll be season 2. But anyway,
I'd watch.
Yeah. Oh, good to know, Dan. Yeah, we're out there, and that's why we need Energy Twitter to promote my,
there we go,
my second career. Anyway, what is going on? So that would be a really decisive switch, because we would still have one Democrat in Arizona on the commission rather than the 3-2 split. We'd have a 4-1 split, but it's anybody's guess at this point. We didn't think, this time in 2020 after the election, we didn't think Kennedy was going to be on, but she pulled from behind and was seated. And right now there's, I think, what did I jot down? I believe it's 93% of the vote is counted, and she is within a point of the number 2 position. There are 4 candidates running. The other Democrat is a few points down, so it seems less likely that she would overtake anyone. But Kennedy's within a point of the number 2. She's in 3rd place, and most of the votes remain. Well, let's just say the county with the most votes remaining to be counted, she leads by 1.7% right now. So she could do it. Yeah.
It's like live watching the New York Times Needle with Abigail giving us the numbers.
It's about like that. It's really nuts. And of course, in Arizona also, we've got Chris Mays, who is a former corporation commissioner. She sat on the ACC back in 2006 when they were, amazingly, I believe, one of the first, if not the first state to adopt a renewables portfolio standard. They have not updated that since 2006, so it remains 15% by 2025. They haven't met it yet. This is how you see, it would really be an interesting switch to who is controlling the Corporation Commission, because as we all know, Arizona's got plenty of sunshine.
And when Chris Mays last was in elected office, she was a Republican, and now she seems to be set to be inaugurated potentially, depending on how the votes shake out, as the Democratic Attorney General.
Exactly. Sorry. Yes, I miss. I got tangled up in my own line of thought and forgot to say she's leading by 0.2 against Republican Abe Hamada for the open seat, which was termed out for Arizona's Attorney General.
And Abigail, you framed up this topic in an article leading up to the elections about what this could mean really for the West on energy policy, these elections. Can you kind of refresh on, like, the Southwest has a lot of solar, needs a lot of transmission? Can you frame up, and maybe Travis, you can also kind of kick in some thoughts about why Southwest commissions are going to be important for the West?
Well, yeah, it's kind of some of what I've spoken to so far is that there's a lot of sunshine in Arizona. There's a lot of sunshine in Nevada, also geothermal in all over this area. There is a whole lot of geothermal energy potential. And in Colorado and New Mexico, tons of wind. That's something we saw last week that happened too, is a transmission. In Arizona, we had approval for the Sunzia transmission line. Right. And that's going to bring a lot of that wind power in New Mexico, the largest wind farm in the US when it goes online, and I believe 2025. We'll be able to deliver that power to Phoenix, to Tucson, to LA, to Vegas, perhaps, interconnection is, we'll see where it all ends up going. But so that's exciting. And Colorado's huge in wind. There's the whole wind belt that kind of runs down the center of the country along the Colorado-Nebraska sort of border, and New Mexico down to West Texas and all the way up. But I'm focusing more on the Southwest, so that's what I think about. But this is where so much of our energy is likely to come from very soon. I mean, it's starting now and more as we move ahead with other plans and goals and laws at various levels in various states and the federal government. So
yeah. Anything to add there, Travis, on kind of your
No,
thoughts on?
Just to briefly touch on New Mexico, it's a state that does have an elected commission, but is phasing out its elections, and it will become an appointed body beginning in the new year. The biggest issue, I should say, in New Mexico has probably been Avangrid's attempted merger or acquisition of PNM, the largest local utility. PNM is not a huge company, and its major asset is the New Mexico utility that it owns. It'll be interesting to see. The regulator rejected the acquisition. The matter is still in litigation. It'll be interesting to see if a new commission does something to reverse that outcome. It reminds me of a prior attempted utility takeover of Hawaiian Electric, which was ultimately rejected by regulators. And PNM strikes me as kind of a similar entity. One of the very few publicly traded corporations that has its headquarters in New Mexico, a state that is poorer than much of the rest of the West, and a state that's skeptical, I think it's fair to say, of outside influences coming in. And Avangrid is, controlled by Iberdrola, a Spanish firm. It's had some troubled investments elsewhere in the United States. The regulatory proceedings featured the chairman of a Maine House committee, where Avangrid owns the utility, literally phoning in public comment to New Mexico to oppose the acquisition. So when you've so offended policymakers in your home turf that they start picking up the phone and dialing other states in our big laboratory of democracy, that tends not to be good for you. That being said, like utilities will do, there's been an exceptional amount of log rolling and favors giving to try to secure eventual approval of this merger. So I know those of us who kind of keep tabs on corporate finance and who's merging with who have definitely looked at that as a possibly significant piece of regulatory activity that is subject to litigation and alteration depending on the new composition of the commission.
Wow, Travis, that was excellent. You want a job? You want to freelance for me when I take a vacation? That was excellent.
And going back to where this all started with the Montana Commission, first, so for listeners who don't know, Travis was a former commissioner on the Montana Public Service Commission several years ago. That's where I first met him. And to your point, Travis, about railroads, I think the Texas Commission is still called the Texas Railroad Service Commission or something like that, right?
They have two commissions. The Texas Railroad Commission, which does not regulate railroads, regulates the natural gas and oil industry, and they are the economic regulator of gas local distribution companies in the state. And there was actually a very spirited campaign where the Democratic opponent of the Republican incumbent had a slogan that was, I can't say this on the podcast, but un-F the grid. He made ball caps and other things, but he was soundly defeated by the incumbent Wayne Christian, who was a former gospel singer. Meanwhile, the Public Utility Commission of Texas regulates the electricity sector, and it regulates ERCOT, which is the wholesale RTO that is intrastate to Texas and famously not connected by alternating current to the rest of the United States grid. So it's a very unique state, but Texas is the only one, I believe, that has chosen to continue to have the nomenclature of the Railroad Commission.
Montana Commission, the reason I brought it up at the beginning, Travis did not take the bait. As Travis, you mentioned about how the Republican was talking about rates, the Democrat was talking about experience, but the only things that everybody else was talking about, it was really her Anne Bukasek, her personality was on the ballot in a lot of ways. The Montana Commission already has some dysfunction, and she certainly is a colorful personality joining it.
Yeah, I think those are relevant considerations, those issues you raise. And, I'm willing to be open-minded about the performance of, the newest member of the Montana Commission. And we'll see. I mean, she is, she does have contrary views on COVID. She's a medical doctor. She was on the Flathead Board of Public Health. She's definitely a cultural lightning rod in that whole part of the state. But she's also someone who's campaigned on saying, I'm going to do the reading. I have experience in sort of synthesizing complex materials into a worldview of my own, which is certainly true. And we'll see how she does. All I really ask of most regulators is that they actually do the work and listen to the parties and frankly apply some modicum of skepticism to the requests that come before them. That's sort of the least you can do. And, she may actually do well in terms of applying skepticism to some aspects of the received wisdom if her past is any guide.
Well, that's a great segue to talk about the next topic around regulatories, because you just gave some great advice for what it takes to be a good regulator. So why don't we head to the next story, Abigail, and see where that takes us.
All right. Well, the National Association of Regulatory Utility Commissioners is hosting its annual meeting and education conference in New Orleans this week. The conference theme is Connecting the Dots with Innovative, Disruptive Technology and Regulation. Its agenda includes topics like energy justice, funding, flexible demand, resiliency, reliability, and a, quote, joint federal state task force on electric transmission, end quote. So, reporting from NARUC, Travis Kavulla, what's going on over there?
Yeah, so this is NARUC's annual meeting, and it is back in full force after COVID. There are about 1,300 people here registered and attending in person. I think it might be the first NARUC conference that has not happened on kind of a hybrid virtual basis. So, but, NARUC is sort of the regulator's student council, if you will. And there's many dozens, hundreds of regulators from around the United States, from as far away as Guam, who come together at this conference to learn from each other, to listen to panels, and to participate in less formal activities in a place like New Orleans. The big topics here, like you say, is number one, the federal government, when it acts, we learned that it can act big. The Inflation Reduction Act, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, are together just huge money cannons, shooting money at utilities, at state governments. And I think a lot of regulators are understandably interested in what that all means for them. So how to take advantage of these opportunities, what are the opportunities under these federal laws, has been a topic much discussed in the hallways here. Flexible demand and distributed energy resources continue to actually be a topic of growing significance. At NARUC, I think there's a general understanding that as things become more difficult to permit, as the stuff that does get permitted is sometimes sources of intermittent supply, that demand needs to step up to the occasion and actually be ready to take a more participatory role in making the whole system balance each other out, itself out. And that's been a big topic as well. I have been a little surprised that there has not been more discussion around affordability and some of the basics of rate making. That actually was a huge issue, right? At least on the gasoline and diesel side in the American election, perhaps less so with electricity, but certainly present for natural gas. But NARUC is not, has surprisingly not focused a lot on those topics, simply because I think it has been to some degree focused on kind of congressional legislative activity in the current thing. And then you mentioned one final thing, which is the FERC-NARUC Joint Task Force on Electric Transmission. The personal interest of mine, FERC convened this task force using a little-known provision of statutory authority in the Federal Power Act that allows them to assemble a joint record when federal and state regulators sit together in open session, and they can use that record to rely upon in making a decision later on. And it's rarely utilized, that provision of federal law. As you can imagine, usually the federal government treats states more as stakeholders and less as some kind of joint record builder or decision maker. But here, FERC, realizing that electric transmission cuts across both jurisdictions in ways that allow either jurisdiction to effectively block anything the other might dictate, it's essentially invited states to a seat at the table. And so far, what those discussions, which have been ongoing for several NARUC meetings, have revealed is that regional differences matter, that the problems in building more electric transmission out west are largely, ironically, lie with the federal government in the form of federal land agencies, whereas I think most people would point the finger more at states and state siting authority for much of the rest of the country. So that remains an interesting topic. I've actually written a white paper at NRG about these interesting governance approaches to when the federal and state regulators sort of sit down together, and it's interesting, if nothing else, to sort of see it in action, because it's very rare for the federal and state jurisdictions to try to jointly problem solve in some kind of a formal manner. That is not something that happens in other industries, but it can happen here pursuant to federal law, and they're taking a swing at it.
Oh, that's exciting. And if I might interject with another question, like you mentioned that the federal landholders play a big role in siting transmission, et cetera, and permitting it, of course. But how about private land ownership in the West? I think that's a huge issue too. It really held up Transwest, for instance, for such a long time. So I'd care to chime in on that?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, no one wants this in their backyard, even if they think that it's necessary. And it's a tale as old as time. And, I have a standing bet with Rob Gramlich about how much transmission will be built during the Biden administration, with me taking the under and him taking the over, because I'm pretty skeptical about getting whoever owns the land to agree to do it, and just the long time that it takes to get steel in the ground. But
so
we'll see.
You've got the under. Where's the line at? You buried. Where's the line?
Is
it in miles, or is it in?
It's in mileage.
In terms of like permitted or actual steel on the ground.
I would not be so foolish as to bet merely on the piece of paper. I want to see the steel on the ground. And I think Rob, I'm struggling to remember the number, but Rob picked an over-optimistic one. It's recorded on Twitter, so long as Twitter still exists when the bet comes due. So I'll look back.
Well, you gotta send that to me so I can link it.
Excellent. Okay. I'll find it.
And is there some complications on this bet? Is it in the first term of the Biden administration, or is there like a complication where you have to take into account a second term likelihood? Because I believe that becomes a very complicated bet.
First term, and the payoff is, pardon me, the winning party gets to pick a hike of their choosing. The loser packs a 6-pack on the hike.
Okay, I think I did see this one, and I just don't remember the number either. But I think I did see when this happened. Very exciting. Yeah, can we pivot back to your white paper? So was this white paper around different regulatory frameworks to make it better? Love to hear if you have any solutions for this whole problem. In the synthesized Twitter framing of, you got to give me in like 140 characters or less.
It's really about where you have the intersection of state and federal decision making, like in transmission, or even like how clean energy intersects with wholesale market design, how you should go about making those decisions that require some degree of consensus, both from FERC and from state regulatory authorities. So it's not an answer to the underlying substantive question. It's more about approaches to try to get consensuality. And this will actually be important in things like RAP and Western markets, as well as they develop, federally jurisdictional markets that clearly require a great deal of state input and consent if they're going to happen at all.
And is this joint task force part of the formula for getting some of that coordination, collaboration amongst us? Is it?
Yeah. I won't claim credit for it, but the
that was
Joint
not
Task
part of your
Force,
white paper. Okay, but it is-
no, the section, using section 209 of the Federal Power Act was definitely in the white paper, and I am delighted that FERC decided to use it, though I will not claim any credit
Just take some
over
credit.
them deciding to
Just
use
just a
that
little
approach.
bit.
Maybe
Just a little bit. Just a little bit of credit.
Your readers can read. I will be sure to provide a link to the paper in your notes.
Thank you very much. I'm loving this. Any other questions about NARUC from Dan or Abigail, or should we move to the next one?
Just curious what the chatter is on the side. Like, is there any interesting vibe or just feeling you're getting from conversations in the hallway?
I mean, I do think it depends, what region you're talking about. And I know it's not your guys' region, but I do think New England regulators are extremely concerned about the upcoming winter, both in terms of customer price exposure as well as possible reliability risks. New England is a region that has sort of ambled its way into linking its market, in effect, to global markets for natural gas and diesel competition. They have some of the richest resources in natural gas under production in the United States, 100 miles away from them, but there's no pipeline capacity to bring the gas to them, and they are instead dependent on LNG imports, diesel imports into their region, and those markets are really tight going into the winter. Diesel is essentially heating oil that many New Englanders continue to use to heat their homes. So this is a potentially big problem. If something bad happens, it could be quite bad. And you're seeing things like the CEO of New England's largest utility, Eversource, writing to President Biden and saying, even before anything has happened, that it's time to declare an emergency. Like we've seen in Texas and California, really crises unfurl. I would say the highest risk, and I think this NERC would agree with this, the highest risk going into the coming winter is probably New England. So there's been a lot of chatter on that, and again, a lot of talk about the how Congress's action in tax subsidies for renewables and clean energy transforms the job of regulators in terms of the integrated resource planning that they conduct, and how they can take advantage of all the other funds that are made possible under the new law, which people are still trying to figure out.
Right.
Yeah.
And we should add that to Jason Fordney, editor of California Energy Markets, is at NARUC, and he's actually recording an episode of, instead of our regular weekly update for Energy Northwest, he'll be recording an update from NARUC that'll be out later this week.
Again,
Energy West Pod, take it out, check it out.
Yeah,
we'll have coverage in California Energy Markets on Friday too. So zeroing in on the things that are happening that are a little more West centric, I presume.
So go say hi to him, Travis, and take a selfie, stick it on Energy Twitter, and then tell us whether we're going to Discord or wherever. Mastodon.
I will be on the lookout for Jason. Absolutely.
Perfect. Okay, take it away, Dan. You got the next one.
As electric markets undergo the transformation to deep decarbonization, various price formation and market design solutions have been proposed to rationalize the spot price of power. One flavor of the solution, which garnered some popularity as a solution for the European energy crisis, was the suggestion of a split market for fossil and non-fossil fuel-based generation. In a Twitter thread on October 4th, Travis presented a take on this issue. You assert that a market structure with a uniform clearing price for all megawatt hours is the issue. Instead, the problem has
not
two.
The issue. I wrote that wrong. That is my fault. It's not
I know.
The
I
issue.
was about to catch myself.
I'll correct it real quick.
Instead,
it's not the issue.
Yeah. Instead, the problem has two other different issues. First, European markets don't have locational prices. And second, they are unhedged and have no security of supply in the medium to long term. So you suggest structural changes, and you reference a couple of solutions, including some kind of resource adequacy construct. And then you mentioned Frank Wolak's standardized fixed price forward contract idea, or Farhad Villamoria's reinsurance market. And one thing I was curious about, though, and it's a brilliant Twitter thread for anybody, and hopefully we'll link to it in the notes, I assume.
Absolutely.
Well, all right, it's a really interesting Twitter thread. Are you okay with that, Travis?
Well, thank you. Yeah, no,
I mean, I
I'm
thought
looking at it. I'm looking at it now, and I'd like to say it's rare that a Twitter thread on electricity price formation garners more than 100 likes. So that's my bar for success. I cleared the bar.
There you go.
With 101.
I mean, if we're going to talk about pricing, though, the conversation, and to your point about structural changes, really has to be what is the value that we're trying to optimize for. So right now with Europe, I mean, in the wake of the Ukrainian invasion, energy security you would think would have to be at the forefront of that conversation.
Yeah, and it should be. They just shouldn't mess around with the spot price of electricity, because the locational marginal price of a megawatt hour of electricity is a truthful piece of information, and it tells you for the last megawatt hour that you needed at that location to serve demand, taking into consideration transmission constraints and congestion, what is the megawatt hour value for that energy. And
So-
if I'm a coal generator or a gas generator or a wind generator or a solar generator, my production at that moment is fungible and tradable and exchangeable, and you as the consumer won't know any different and don't need to know any different where it came from at that moment. So there's another question, though, of over the long term, how do you assure adequacy of supply, a diversification of your portfolio, making sure that all of your eggs are not in the Russian pipeline basket, or that you have, sort of in America, perhaps burned the bridge as you were trying to cross it and suddenly don't have enough, gas peaker capacity in certain oblong Western states that may face that issue. But those are actually not concerns about the real-time price formation. What the real-time price does is it's sometimes screaming at you that energy is extremely expensive because the fuel cost input is very expensive, or it's telling you that there's significant scarcity, that supply is having a difficult time covering demand that's present on the system. And so, don't hate the messenger is sort of the classic message about this. And I feel as though, Europe has found itself working in a world where it doesn't even model locationality to its spot prices, thus resulting in an electricity market that I won't get into the complex details, but doesn't even accurately print prices based on the locational value of real time. And so it's kind of working with a map that shows the world to be flat, and then it's complaining about its compass. The problem isn't the compass, it's the map. And meanwhile, in the United States, we've actually designed these markets in a way that has locationality to the marginal price, which is a really important thing, to go from these wider zonal markets to more nodal markets. And the concern, I think, is that spot pricing is just too volatile. Sometimes it's zero or negative, and sometimes sky high, to be able to really intelligently compensate power resources. But the reality is power resources are not earning their revenues by being completely exposed to spot market pricing. In fact, the volatility of spot market pricing is something that screams at consumers and those resources to get themselves hedged, to sell to each other under longer term contracts with more stable prices. And if you told yourself what would amount to a sweet little lie by blowing up the locational marginal price and somehow making it more smooth, what you would probably do in the first order of business is actually create a perverse incentive for people to hedge less, because suddenly the spot price would appear falsely to be less volatile than it actually is. You'd be having the same casino, but the casino would be telling you that it wasn't as risky to be placing bets in the spot market. So that was a pile of analogies in an attempt to explain a complicated topic, but I'm seeing this appear a lot in both European and American thinking. I strongly disagree with it, as is probably obvious, and it is really important that the integrity of these spot prices be maintained, but that is not to say that there shouldn't be a regulatory intervention to boost resource adequacy the security of fuel supplies and everything else. We should simply take what we're seeing from the spot price market as a kind of canary in the coal mine. And again, we should allow the canary to enter the mine rather than shooting it before it can.
The only analogy I think you needed to add in there was a copper sheet analogy. We need some copper sheet, you know. Got to reference that every once in a while. So I interviewed Frank Wolak on Public Power Underground before. Big fan of his concept. I haven't gotten to Farhad's analysis yet or his concept. Love to hear your take on the different mechanisms that you can use to restructure some of that forward term market structuring for hedging. Do you have takes on, like, of the different concepts that are like thought of, which ones you think are rational and would be good approaches? Because
the most traditional approach to resource adequacy is neither of those, and I didn't mention it in the Twitter thread simply because it's so in effect everywhere, and it is essentially some kind of capacity market where a very knowledgeable administrator takes a look at power plants and says, this is likely what a power plant can maximally produce at a time of system stress. And then it gives them credit for that. And if you create a market for it, it allows them to sell that credit to load serving entities in exchange for its reliability value. And what the power plant is doing is saying, yes, I've heard the bureaucrats say that I'm good for 90% of my nameplate capacity, and I'm going to sell you these 90 credits to the load serving entity, which can now be assured that it's doing its part for overall system reliability. And those 90 credits obligate me to offer energy during these times of system stress, not necessarily to produce the energy, but at least make my energy production available. And if I don't do that, I face a financial penalty or more. So that's the capacity markets in the East. That is RAP that's being set up, though it's market-ish rather than a market.
It's not a market.
Not a market. We don't want to call. We don't want to call it a market.
Clear.
My God,
not a market.
I love how like a compliance mechanism is somehow more politically desirable than an actual market. But whatever. In any case, they all share these kind of similar DNA. Wolak,
what do you think? So we'll pivot here, but Wolak has this take on that type of a market construct that it's like a tenured professor, that you're basically paying him to show up, but it's no real. It's like it's as good of an incentive as giving a professor tenure to make sure they're good at teaching. Like, what do you think of that? Like,
well, that is a valid criticism, and that is the main defect of these capacity markets. The best defense of which is that they're the worst thing except for all the others.
Right.
Now, Wolak has an alternative idea, and that is basically to take for any given system with an amount of demand, to put that demand out to bid, and suppliers, rather than having the bureaucrat come up with the right number, suppliers are offering sort of a slice of system, basically saying, I can supply 5% of the total load, whatever it will happen to be in this future hour, with my resources or with resources that I buy. And it's actually trading in megawatt hours of produced energy and not just in the offer of energy or capacity. So that's interesting. It has nowhere been implemented, but it seems theoretically valid. I know, he's heard feedback from people saying, oh, it would be very complex, and you're just taking this attempt to solve what is, after all, a big problem of extreme tail events that should be rationalized on a kind of central basis, like an integrated resource plan basis, and you're trying to decentralize and push that down to a bunch of bidders who might not know anything about what they're actually doing. What makes you think they're smarter? But on the other hand, as someone who believes that incentives matter, it is nice that someone with a financial incentive would be responsible, perhaps, for doing this. And then Farhad's idea is even possibly more exotic than Frank's, or I don't want to say theoretically exotic, because it's an interesting idea, but it would basically create a kind of reinsurance market where your deliveries to demand, if customers were not actually receiving service because of resource adequacy reasons, penalty payments would kick in, And that would lead sort of the insurance market, the reinsurance market, to make investments in resource adequacy that can maintain reliability, because they face the possibility that they'll have to pay out damages in exchange for the premiums they've been collecting. So in essence, a classic insurance market. Unfortunately, even there, you don't escape the question of regulatory judgment, because as everyone knows who's bought insurance, you're obligated to buy insurance. And usually you end up buying the insurance product that the regulator tells you to buy, auto insurance, health insurance, whatever. So, and if there was no individual mandate to buy auto insurance or an individual mandate to buy health insurance, would everyone actually buy it? No. And the people who didn't buy it are oftentimes vulnerable customers or people who don't understand much about what insurance is or the product they're buying. And therefore, it's been the judgment of society in general that you should have some kind of law or regulation that makes them buy it. And that means we're right back to a capacity market or something like it.
Which is a great segue to the next one, where we talk more about some regulators and the importance of regulators implementing policy. You ready, Abigail?
Yeah, regulators talking about markets. The California Independent System Operator hosted a stakeholder symposium November 9th and 10th, where Western energy markets evolution was a frequent area of discussion. The agenda was packed with notable dignitaries, including opening remarks by Jennifer Granholm, Secretary of the Department of Energy. Our own Jason Fordney, editor of California Energy Markets, was in attendance to cover the event for our publication. He noted a recurring theme of, quote, more of everything in his coverage of the Western Utility Executives panel, and a link to his reporting will be in the show notes. The closing panel for the first day of the event included elected representatives from both Nevada and Colorado. Infamously, Nevada and Colorado passed that legislation I mentioned earlier, requiring RTO participation by 2030. The Nevada legislation applies to transmission providers governed by the Public Utility Commission of Nevada, which is appointed. And the Colorado legislation applies to all transmission utilities. Both require participation by 2030. The Colorado legislation calls for the creation of a Colorado Electric Transmission Authority. So, Travis, what's your take on that as a former regulator?
Yeah, so this is interesting, and you have not had a long history of lawmaking in the American West outside of California around mandates to participate in RTOs. But I think candidly we've reached the point in the West where most people realize that some kind of evolved wholesale market that has a single dispatch and an overlying resource adequacy regime perhaps is somehow necessary. So whether you do it through a legislative mandate with regulation filling in the details, or whether you do it through an organic and industry-led process with regulation having some oversight, I think both of those can land you in the right end state. Though as general rule, I have some skepticism of state laws getting into great detail about these topics, mainly because they often feature items of log rolling that are not necessarily great for the public at large. But I have not looked into the specifics of the Nevada and Colorado statutes. I only know the kind of headline that you read off about participation by 2030. I will say in general that it seems that the West is sort of approaching, maybe more quickly than before, a time for choosing when it comes to which wholesale market people would like to belong to. And if you're a regulator or a staff member on a regulator or a person in a load-serving entity role, it's definitely worth thinking about which one fits best for you and which one is more likely to vindicate your interest. Full disclosure, I was a board member on the governing body of the energy imbalance market. I played a role in helping CAISO set that up. I'm still a great believer in that. And even though I have my doubts about California public policy in all sorts of ways, the value of markets is often about trading the same thing that two parties, perhaps because of their divergent policy views, have a different view of the value of, or trading something And that could be because of public policy. It could be because they're at different longitudes or latitudes in terms of demand and when their resources are producing. And so it gives me some bit of skepticism that a market would be created that does not include 50% of the load in the American West. If you do that, you're going to have to end up creating some kind of comprehensive joint operating agreement between the two markets, because as we all know, there's a huge interrelationship between California and the rest of the West. And ironically, JOAs end up being disputes between RTOs, and those disputes very much are subject to FERC calling the balls and strikes. So in a strange way, if the West doesn't hang together, it could eventually lead to a situation where FERC has to engage in more adjudication between states, which I don't think what people are aiming for in the West last time I checked.
So I have to claim ignorance here. With the JOAs, I mostly know of those being a longtime newspaperman, joint operating agreements to keep two ailing papers alive in a city for a little while longer. So how does that work with utilities or markets, ISOs, RTOs? I'm not familiar with this.
That's good because
operating the grid, or
I've never heard of the JOA being in use for the newspaper industry. So that's a fascinating use case. No, these JOAs are just they dictate the terms of trade and dispatch between RTOs when you have two abutting one another. So you end up having to solve problems like the trading day and the timing of trades and settlements and who's leaning on who for if you have a resource adequacy market, and who's responsible for buying transmission and how does it settle. Basically anything that would be necessary to describe the necessary preconditions to trade between two RTOs have to be spelled out in the joint operating agreement or somewhere adjacent to that JOA. So it really becomes, much like a tariff that FERC would approve that describes the RTO's internal operations. It becomes a very important document. And unlike, again, what makes it important is that unlike a tariff that a utility might file or that a regional state committee might direct an RTO's board to file, if that's the governance structure, I think a JOA is just because it involves two possibly conflicting entities, disagreements would, by order of course, kind of have to be resolved by the federal regulator.
Yeah, but it's an interesting point that you raised though about the 50% of load in the West in terms of how that how that plays out as folks lean towards one option or the other as wholesale market proposals come out. We're seeing that right now. That's kind of what everyone in the West is waiting to see what happens with the California's day-ahead market proposal and SPP's Markets Plus.
I wanted to dig a little bit before we move on. And, the difference between the Western Resource Adequacy Program was a kind of an initiative. What's that?
Not a market.
Correct, not a market. Was an initiative that was kind of engaged the electric utilities to come up with the market design, or not a market, the program design. And instead of like in Colorado and Nevada, there's this legislative that would kind of require it. Is there any just high level takes you have on, as a former regulator, the different stressors between those two perspectives? And is one easier policy to engage with than the other?
So you're asking, is it easier when it's coming from the industry or from the legislature?
Yeah.
Maybe
just cut everything I said, and then we'll just have you summarizing me, and then it'll be a way better question. How about that?
Yeah. I think from the perspective of a regulator, there's some regulators who will look at their statutory authority and be comfortable with receiving industry proposals, even those that are highly transformative, like the formation of an RTO would be. And there's other regulators that are more cautious and are looking for a signal or a law from the state legislature to actually do something. And so I think a lot of it just has to depend on the political institutions of the states in question and the regulators in question. I mean, I have to say from least from my perspective in Montana, I thought the statutes gave, pretty much all the authority, one might deed, to effectuate an RTO if that was the direction that you're going. But of course, the legislature is the sovereign of a state, and there's good reason to believe, especially in Colorado, where it's kind of been like Lucy and Charlie with the football, where Excel has taken a number of runs at this, hasn't gotten it done, and the legislature just decided to give them a deadline. And that is what now we're working with.
Yeah, but of course, in Colorado, Excel is not the only game in town, as it is in Nevada, as NV Energy more or less is in Nevada. So, which is a key factor in the different shape of the legislation there. That Colorado has a lot of co-ops. So.
Yep, very true.
Yep. Okay, well, that's I think that's it for that story. Let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll close out with a segment where we TLDR our way through the news and short to ground. Public Power Underground is brought to you by NWPPA. The Northwest Public Power Association believes in the power of training and education. Every year, more than 6,500 public power employees learn and network at our classes, webinars, workshops, and conferences. NWPPA offers more than 250 events, wowzer, to choose from in areas such as leadership, engineering, operations, accounting, and finance, communications, and many more. Sometimes this very podcast, Public Power Underground, is broadcast live from one of our events. We call that being more powerful together. What will you learn this year? Find an event that's right for you at nwppa.org/catalog. That's nwppa.org/catalog. This is Short to Ground, a segment where we blow a fuse covering the news. I'm Paul Dockery.
And I'm Travis Kavulla.
And we're shorting. You got to do it with me. This makes it more fun. We're shorting to ground. There you go.
Okay, I'm up with the first item. The California Public Utilities Commission released a new proposal for the state's solar net metering program. The new proposal, often referred to as NEM 3.0. NEM 3.0 would replace retail rates with avoided cost calculator valuation and net billing that leaves legacy NEM customers on their current plans. The California PUC said the rate structure under the proposal would be significantly different between peak and off-peak hours, and the program would encourage shifting load and storing energy during evening and overnight hours and exporting during peak periods to provide greater grid reliability. For more coverage, check out Ernst coverage in California energy markets. And I certainly know as a Sunrun shareholder how good this was for the rooftop solar companies. So don't let them tell you anything different, even though I'm sure they'll be complaining about it nevertheless.
The Western Electricity Coordinating Council's 2022 Resource Adequacy Assessment, released on November 2nd, 2022, noted a rapidly changing resource mix that relies more on variable energy resources, which will create increasing resource adequacy risk in the West over the next 10 years. Compared to last year's assessment, the Demand at Risk Indicator, or DRI, decreased through 2025, quote, suggesting that the risk for load loss decreased, unquote, the report states. However, the Planning Reserve Margin Indicator, or PRMI, has increased, quote, indicating that there is a greater variability in the system, which needs to be accounted for to maintain reliability, unquote. Dan Catchpole covered the released report in the November 11th edition of Clearing Up.
British Columbia-based PowerX has committed to joining the Southwest Power Pool's proposed Markets Plus initiative if it goes live in the West, the first to make such a commitment. SPP said November 7th it is considering launching Markets Plus in stages, starting with the governance structure in 2023, then the imbalance market the next year, followed as soon as possible by the day-ahead market. Dan Catchpole covered the news for Clearing Up. They announced this the first day of the California ISO Symposium. That's got to be the most passive-aggressive thing you can do in the industry with RTOs.
Of course. 2 Northwest public-private partnerships are among more than 20 proposals for $7 billion in federal funding to establish regional clean energy hubs. One is led by developer Obsidian Renewables and the other by Washington and Oregon state governments. Washington and Oregon submitted their proposal dubbed PNWH2, hub for the Pacific Northwest Hydrogen Association, a partnership of tribal, labor, government, environmental, and private sector hydrogen company leaders. Another Dan Catchpole story in clearing up, and we can talk about it once we get through this segment, Dan, because you wanted to talk about it earlier.
According to coverage by Daniel Moore and Bloomberg Law, Senator Joe Manchin won't hold a renomination hearing for FERC's Rich Glick. Glick, a Democrat who was nominated in 2017 by Donald Trump, was renominated by the Biden White House in May. He currently serves as the chairman of the commission, and without being reconfirmed, he would have to leave the commission at the end of the year. Senator Manchin serves as the chair of the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee.
Other brief mentions from the Energy News Roundup. Mike Hummel, CEO and general manager of Salt River Project, announced he will retire in May 2023. Hummel has been at the helm for 5 of his 41 years at SRP.
ESS Inc., an Oregon-based manufacturer of long-duration iron flow batteries for commercial and utility-scale energy storage applications, and Burbank Water and Power, signed an agreement through which the company will construct a 75 kW, 500 kilowatt-hour ESS energy warehouse for the municipal utility, which will connect with an existing 265 kW solar array on BWP's Eco Campus. The installation is expected to be complete by December 2023.
PacifiCorp is seeking an approximately $27.9 million base revenue requirement increase, which translates to a nearly 26% net rate increase to its base electric rates in California, according to the utility's CPUC application in May. Approximately 76% of the increase is related to wildfire mitigation and vegetation management, O'Rourke said during a November 7th public hearing. O'Rourke, I forgot to copy, is an official for PacifiCorp. I'm intuiting from what I wrote, but you should go check out Greg Mason's coverage in Clearing Up to make sure I got that right.
And from Energy Twitter notifications, the Public Utility Commission of Texas released a new independent analysis of 6 different proposals to increase the reliability of the grid. The assessment was performed by E3 under the direction of the PUC Commission and staff. The PUCT is adding 5 days to the normal 30-day public comment period to accommodate the Thanksgiving holiday, and comments are due by noon Thursday, December 15.
Our own Travis Kavulla was quoted in the Wall Street Journal over the weekend in an article by Jennifer Hiller titled, quote, "The U.S. electric system is leaning on customers to avoid blackouts," unquote. Travis is making the case for, quote, "presets for more major appliances to be responsive to the electric grid's reliability needs." Love to hear more about that, end quote.
Absolutely. Spot market power in the Northwest for delivery today, November 14, is at $125 per megawatt hour, with natural gas at $7.96 per MMBTU, translating to a spark spread of $69 and a heat rate of 15,700. Spot power in the Southwest is at $90 per megawatt hour, Southern California at $95.32, and Northern California at $96.12. The price of December 2022 natural gas futures at Henry Hub decreased 40.3 cents from $6 to 26.8 cents per MMBTU November 2nd to $5.86 on November 9th. The price of the 12-month strip averaging December 2022 through November 2023 futures contracts declined 20.5 cents to $5.15 per MMBTU.
Absolutely great job reading that. I don't know that I could have done that as well as you did. Well done. Working natural gas in storage in the lower 48 states as of October 31st, 2021 totaled 3,531 billion cubic feet, according to month-end estimates based on EIA's weekly natural gas storage report released November 10th. This total is the second lowest end of refill season inventory level since 2008, highlighting comments Travis made earlier about kind of the fear of the coming winter. Total inventory as of October 31st was 115 BCF, 3% less than the 5-year end of October average for 2017 to 2021, and 104 BCF, which is 3% less than last year at this time.
This week in NOAA climate forecast, the 6 to 10 day outlook has below normal temperatures across the country, with average precipitation for Washington and Oregon and above average precipitation for Northern California. No update to the 30 or 90-day outlook since the last episode. The only weather trends that fall in the likely category for the region are above average precipitation in eastern Oregon, Idaho, and western Montana in the 30-day outlook, and above average temperatures in Arizona and New Mexico in the 90-day outlook.
Lastly, checking Northwest Water Supply forecast. October through September flows of the Dalles for water year 2023 are currently forecast to be 85% of normal, and April through September is at 88%. Standing elevation at Grand Coulee for November 13th was 1,285 feet. That's it for our TLDR segment. Thanks to Public Power Underground's production partners at News Data for letting us use their leads. If you want to know more, you can find the complete stories in California energy markets and clearing up. Ready to close out this segment, Travis? That's short to ground. We did it. I'll start with you, Abigail. Any stories in there you wanted to quickly get through? That took way longer than what I was hoping it would.
I think it's about getting ready for winter. I think that's really what it comes down to. And Travis is being quoted in the Wall Street Journal about leaning on customers to ensure that we keep the lights on and perhaps more importantly, the heat on. I'm doing my part, guys. I've got typing gloves on.
That's awesome. Typing gloves. Fast.
I gotta have
it. Great.
So yeah, like bundle
Travis,
up.
we're gonna compensate these people at some point, right?
We are, yeah, and that's what this whole that's what this whole story is about. Is like, let's stop begging people to conserve and let's empower them to conserve and pay them for doing so, for being the de facto power plant that their appliances can be. So, but doing that, as I say in the article, is sort of contingent on making sure that their appliances are smart, that the grid is smart, that they have retail rates that actually reflect the time varying costs on the wider grid. If you don't send any kind of signal to demand at all that its contributions are valuable, then it's not going to happen. And that means you'll just get more Twitter of Gavin Newsom asking people to conserve for no money, which is not good.
Well, the other thing I'd like,
not best.
Oh no, go ahead.
The other thing that a key piece to it that from my perspective would be like having apps so that you can set some parameters, so you're not having to think about it like, oh, does this make sense for me to not run my washing machine or dryer right now, versus just having it automated so that you're like, when it hits this and this parameter, take this appliance offline. I don't have time to think about time of use rates. Like,
there's every reason in the world for me to have the Kaiso app and the ERCOT app open on my phone a lot, but ordinary consumers don't. If they're doing that, it indicates a problem. The one other story that I'd comment on, just a shout out to my friend, Chairman Rich Glick, who I know has been on your program. I hope he gets renominated. I think he's a real thoughtful individual, certainly one of the more studied people to have served in the role of commission chair for a long while. And I don't claim to know what's happening around the behind the scenes politics, but he's a solid individual. And even when I disagree with him, his contributions on the commission have been very clear and well explained.
Hard agree. Thank you for that. And I will just follow up and say, we're going to follow you wherever you go so that we can learn more about the PUC Texas's independent study of the scenarios. Love to hear your takes on that wherever you go. But we're running out of time, so that's all we're going to cover this week. Travis, do you feel valued and appreciated?
I sure do, Paul. Thank you for having me.
Did you enjoy this? Like,
I
sincerely.
did.
You can be honest. Nobody's gonna listen. Nobody's gonna get this far. You can lie. It's fine.
I love it, and I don't think I got in any trouble with my communications people. So
that's the best take. That's the best take. Abigail, do you feel valued and appreciated?
I do. Thanks, Paul.
How about you, Dan? This is fun.
Always. And it's administrative law judge Shannon O'Rourke. She's an administrative law judge, not a Pacific Corps person, it turns out.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for doing that for me.
I just couldn't help but go fact checked it. So
that's perfect. I really appreciate
feel
you
appreciated.
For that. I actually really appreciate
Paul,
you for that. Thank you for doing that.
Appreciated?
Yes, I do. I absolutely do. I also feel like I'm out of time, so I'm going to jump off and I'm going to record the rest of this some other time by myself because the rest of it's just readout. So thank you all for joining this, and let's do it again sometime.
All right.
Enthusiasts roll on.
Public Power Underground is the power industry's premier infotainment program that covers electric utility and electric utility adjacent news from a power department's perspective. You found the episode, but you may have colleagues, friends, or peers who haven't. We'd appreciate it if you sent it along, just in case. See if they like it. It's a fun little suit. Try it on. Maybe we'll like it and we'll wear it right out of the store. It'll be wonderful. You can also sign up for an unintrusive newsletter with links to all the ways to consume this fascinating content at publicpowerunderground.substack.com. As always, send any news, questions, opinions, corrections, or complaints to me on Twitter at @PowerManager. You can find Dan Catchpole at Clearing Up, where he is a reporter and associate editor. And you can find Abigail Sawyer at California Energy Markets, where she is the associate editor and reporter for the Southwest. You don't have to be subscribed to News Data's weekly newsletters to get this podcast, but it sure makes the podcast make a lot more sense. Public Power Underground for electric utility enthusiasts. Public Power Underground, it's work to watch.